Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Today we talk with Ruth Hovsepian of Montreal, Canada. A preacher's kid. We're going to talk about prayer, what it is, what it isn't. We're going to talk about sex addiction. I think we might have 2 episodes worth. She is a great lady and a podcaster as well, so stay tuned. Thanks for joining me for this Bob's Your Uncle podcast, Season 3, Episode 32. Of note, the opinions are strictly my own and those of my guests. I hope you like the music in the background. That's Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. You can now find us and comment to us wherever you get your podcasts. Tell us what matters to you, what triggers your joy, what bothers you in the world. Let us know. We'll see where the Spirit leads us. Whether you're at home, online, on the road with me in your headset at the gym, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get your podcast, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us these 18 minutes.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about a science book. Don't know much about the French I took, but I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
On this date in history, in 1589, King Henry III of France was stabbed by a Jacobin friar and died the next day after acknowledging his ally, Henry of Navarre, a Huguenot, would be his successor. In 1944, 2 events of note. In World War II, the Warsaw Uprising began as the Polish underground tried to oust the German army, and the final entry was recorded in the diary of Anne Frank, that Jewish girl who spent 2 years in hiding during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. In 1980, on this date, Icelandic teacher and politician Vigdis Finnbogadóttir became the president of Iceland. She was the first woman in the world to be elected the head of state in a national election. And in 1981, the cable television network MTV debuted with the broadcast of the music video, Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. Ruth Hovsepian, thank you for joining me for this podcast. You live in Montreal. Are you bilingual?
I am bilingual. Actually, I'm quadrilingual. I speak my mother tongue. I speak Armenian, I speak Greek, I speak English, and I speak French as well.
I think the United Nations is calling you. Well, when you learn all that, language is not just an academic activity, it's a culture, isn't it? So you really
it is.
know 4 cultures all at once.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? There's so much truth in what you just said, because speaking Armenian or Greek means that I can be part of that culture, part of that community here. They accept you so readily. Even if you speak a handful of words and make an effort, you are brought into a community and you experience such a great culture.
From what I read, you are the daughter of a preacher. In what city did you grow up, or was your father a traveling man?
No, we grew up in Montreal. My dad immigrated here in the 60s, in 1960, actually, from Greece. And he started to attend an English church, a Baptist church here, and has remained there. In the 80s, he was filling in the pulpit between pastors. The congregation asked him to become the pastor of the church. And since the 80s, early 80s, he has been the pastor of the church. Therefore, I became a PK, a pastor's kid.
You've written books on prayer, including your latest sojourn into this subject, Can you summarize the one thing you want people to understand from your unpacking of this subject?
For me, prayer is not something that we do when we sit down to a meal, when we're struggling with something, or we're at wits end. It's something that we need to become very intentional about. It's a relationship. That's what I have come to learn in the last 10 years, that prayer is an intentional relationship between you and God.
Prayers. I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and you say your prayers. You wake up in the morning, you say a certain prayer. And on seeing a rainbow, you say a prayer. On getting new clothing, on affixing a mezuzah to the door, you say that prayer. What prayer is it that we say? At this point, my mother or father would ask.
Right.
And I always knew those things. Is prayer for you a function in that way? That is, you say a prayer, but you sound like you're saying prayer is more than that. It's not just
It is.
the enterprise
It
of
is.
saying things.
It is. So a couple of things with what you said. First, I live in one of the largest Hasidic Jewish communities in Montreal. I am surrounded by them. I understand the culture. I grew up with them around me, and I see the traditions that are there. And I see how religious, air quote, religious these people are. And in some ways, if you have no faith, it is enviable because they know what to do, when to do it, at what time, and who's doing it. As Christians, as those of us who identify as evangelical Christians, we have lost the boat on this one, because I remember as a child, being taught to pray. I said a prayer when I ate dinner, and when I went to bed, I said another one. This is when I was very young. We, like a parrot, I would just repeat these prayers at certain times. Now, my parents had prayer lives. I saw them praying. They went to Bible study, prayer meetings. But I remember very distinctly one night going to bed very tired, and I was very young. I must have been about 8 years old. And I hit the pillow. And as I was falling asleep, I jolted awake, remembering that I had not prayed. I had not said my prayers. I jumped out of bed, fearful. And I remember that fear that was in me, because I had been taught to pray this. And I thought, if I don't say my bedtime prayer, if I die, I'm going to hell. And I had that sort of concept in my head for a long time, until, even into my adult life, as I, was building some kind of a faith-based, my problem was for a long time was I was living the faith of my parents and my grandparents, even though I had made a commitment to the Lord at a young age, around 11 or 12. I hadn't developed that relationship. It wasn't a personal relationship. Therefore, my prayers were kind of, very, I want to call it like plastic. There was no way to make that personalized. It was what it was. It was only at the other end of my journey, going through addictions and whatnot, and then going through my sobriety, where prayer became something extremely personal to me. It became something, it was my lifeline. It's the only way to explain it. It was my lifeline because, as you said, I'm a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. Who do I turn to as a pastor's kid to say and admit, confessing that I am addicted to sex and pornography? And I deal with that addiction using alcohol to numb my senses and to quiet the Holy Spirit. Who do you turn to? Who do you go to? Yeah.
Let me ask a different angle on things. Weight loss was very helpful to my last guest in getting him on a journey to wellness. And you talk about it a lot on your podcast. And I wonder, what's it like to share this private journey so publicly?
It is difficult. First of all, anytime you are addicted, whether it's food or drugs, whatever it is, there's a shame element to it. add to it, growing up in the church and having people perceive you as, a Christian and having certain things, then you're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a sister. It's hard. It's hard. So 2 years ago, when I wrote my first book and it came out, or actually last year, the book came out, it was a time that I had to talk about it with my parents, those that are closest to me, because I knew that they knew something had been off, during those years. They just did not know what it was. But to me, a health journey, sobriety, and developing my relationship with the Lord came hand in hand. I took hold of my life and I wanted to be better, do better, and all of it worked hand in hand. So my health journey, I don't talk about it too much. There's so much noise about it, out there, and people who are more eloquent about that. I still struggle with weight, that I'm very open about that. That is a struggle I've had since childhood. So I need to work on that before I can help others. But my health journey was also a journey that helped me gain control with other areas of my life.
Yeah,
That's my biggest thing.
I get it. How big did you get before your dieting and change of life began?
Well, let me see. The heaviest I have ever been was way over 300 pounds. At the time, I didn't have a digital one. So the moment the needle went to zero, right, because it goes up to 200, and then at 300 or so, it goes back, I stopped counting.
What was
So it was,
everybody has their own journey, obviously, in everything we do.
yeah.
For you, was it a moment of revelation? No, I'm not going to do this again. What was the trick for you, if you have one?
So weight loss for me was landing in the emergency. I had been struggling with gout for a long time. And this one time, it was just so bad that my youngest daughter had to leave her work and come and look after her mom. The shame of it, and not being, being a parent and not being there for your child, but your child is looking after you. And this was like 7 years ago. So, I was in my early 50s and I was like, what is wrong with me? I need to take control about, over this. So I did cut out. I have an underlying autoimmune disease, which doesn't help, but I had been gorging on food, like just, it didn't matter. I got my hand on it, I ate it. There was no control. And I think I have discovered that my personality is like that. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. I don't have I envy people who have that, that ability to have a happy medium. I'm a black and white person in every aspect of my life. So that day I said, no, no more. I cannot do this. I had been miserable at my daughter's wedding a few months earlier. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't dance. I didn't have joy anymore. I was just miserable. And I woke up the next morning. I came out of the emergency, came home, and I said, that's it. I'm done. And cold turkey, cut off everything. I haven't had soda. I haven't had pop in 7 years. I haven't had ice cream in all those years. These are things that I loved. Potato chips, I can't anymore, because if I have one, I won't be able to stop. This is my addiction, right? So I know I eat healthy. I make good choices now. I'm in a good place in that way. I still have underlying health issues, but again, I thank God that a healthy lifestyle helps with the day-to-day care. It even helped my mental state when I lost the weight, and it wasn't even losing the weight. It was um, controlling pain and depression and the darkness, the dark cloud in my brain, that feeling of I haven't slept enough or I don't have energy. That has helped tremendously, just the healthy part of it.
Success is great for a shame-based problem, and
Yeah.
so you sound I'm just really happy to meet you on this side. You raised 3 children, all now adults, on your own, or at least in the shadow of divorce. Have
Yes.
you seen the evangelical church change over your lifetime in matters of marriage and divorce?
Goodness, that is a question. And I have seen this, talking with women, counseling women. I'm not a coach. I just counsel as a woman to other women who are struggling.
Hey, we're going to leave it right there, and we're going to talk to Ruth more next week about this addiction thing she keeps talking about and how it can work in your life and in your friends' lives. This is a woman who's really been practicing what she's continuing to preach, and we'll talk about her Out of the Darkness podcast as well. So make sure you're back with us next week. What do you think about all this? Write me on bobmendo@aol.com, or comment or even video to me on Instagram or Twitter at Bob'sYourUnclePC. I'd love to know what you think about all this. Don't forget to post a review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcasts. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Every week we read from the #1 bestseller of all time, the Bible. And this week is no different. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians and said this: "Don't you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own? You've been bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body." Join me next week as we conclude this 2-part series with Ruth and find out more about her life, what she's learned, what we can learn, and how we can grow as people in these days. See you then. Until then, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven, and Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.